Awesome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you guys are tuning in from. Thank you so much for coming to this month's Power Platform Connectors and Integrations Labs call. And it is February 8th. Just a reminder that this call is indeed recorded and will be posted on YouTube as part of the M365 community channel. And we shall get into it. I shall drop my links and the links of our other presenters today in the chat for you guys to feel free to connect with us. Just an introduction. I am Jocelyn. It is so nice to meet you all for all of the new faces. I was originally from the East Coast in New York and New Jersey, and that's actually where I am right now, visiting my family. But I also live in Seattle. I went to University of Washington with a mechanical engineering and degree and Spanish minor, which is a little bit atypical for the computer science space. Before working with the Power Platform Connectors team, I used to work for the Cloudflows team as part of the Maker Experience, which is where Chris is based from. You guys shall meet Chris soon. Just to set the stage as we start talking about connectors today, I just want to do a quick recap of the types of connectors so that everything makes sense as we get going. Power Platform connectors span 3 separate products and technically a little more, but predominantly Power Apps, Power Automate, and Azure Logic Apps. We have one type of connector, which is the custom connector. These connectors are curtailed to your specific environment and can be deployed in that space. Then we have shared connectors, which are the ones that we are predominantly going to be focusing on today. They include first-party connectors, connectors that were made and deployed from Microsoft, so think about SharePoint, Excel, Outlook, those types. We also have third-party verified publishers. So those are external publishers that own the API that they are leveraging. Some really good examples of those include Adobe and DocuSign. They leverage the API that they own in order to make and share this connector so it's publicly available to all. And the last is the independent publisher connector. These connectors are made by the non-API owners leveraging open source code in order to create connectors and share with everybody. We call these oftentimes community contributions, and we actually will have an independent publisher demo his connector with us today. Sean Kelly is here, and he leveraged the Microsoft Learn API to create a connector just maybe 2 months ago, right, Sean? Pretty recent. So super excited to have that demo today. As always, we will do a connector count update just to share with you guys. So in December, we crossed the 900 total shared connectors threshold with you guys. And it has been less than 2 months, and we have already garnered 40 more. Internally, this is a huge, huge deal because we had a goal of growing to 1,000 total connectors by July of 2023, with an internal goal of hitting 900 by end of 2022. So that basically means that we are 40% of the way of our goal, only a month and a week into 2023. So we are really doing a fantastic job, and that is much due to the contributions of you guys as community members, as well as our incredible certification team. I actually want to give a quick shout out to Amjad. Amjad is our certification program manager. For some of you guys, you probably will recognize his name in our GitHub repo. He actually has published 3 of his very first connectors as well this month. So awesome shout out to Amjad. Since the last time we spoke a month ago, on I believe January 11th, we have added 27 new connectors into our total ecosystem. So again, this spans Power Apps, Power Automate, and Azure Logic Apps. 13 of which are from community contributions of independent publishers. We now have almost the same quantity of independent publisher connectors as we do first-party connectors, which is really incredible. That just shows how involved the community is. We are at 232 IP, 233 first-party, and 475 from verified publishers. So those are those core API owners. If we keep going, I just want to show you guys some screen recordings that I took from a really awesome demo by an independent publisher. So a lot of times a feedback or criticism of the independent publisher program, which is entirely not valid, is that these connectors are fluffy. These connectors don't have business use case scenarios, and that could not be further from the truth. A couple of months ago, Robin, one of our independent publishers, contributed by creating an OpenAI connector. And this came out months back, but what's hot right now? Nothing's hotter than OpenAI right now. So we actually have on YouTube, you can find in our demos playlist, a demo from Robin of his connector. But I took some screen recordings of this just to show you guys how awesome this use case is. Hi, Daniel. I see you just popped in. Showing off the OpenAI connector we are. So here it is being leveraged in a flow, and he is looking at the OpenAI connector and using the GPT-3 action. So from here, he asked it in a prompt, what's your favorite animal and why? And also, I want you to tell me about the size and weight of this animal. He goes and he runs the flow, and it takes a few seconds to run. And from here, it's going to give him back a response. So the GPT-3 has completed the prompt, and he can scroll down and see the question he asked. And the answer is, elephants are my favorite. They're intelligent and loyal, and they can weigh 6 or 7 tons. So this is pretty awesome. It's exactly just like GPT-3. And that's only one of the 3 use case scenarios that he was able to share with us. Let's keep going. The next one is he integrates GPT-3 into a Power Apps, and it kind of is reminiscent of a Power Virtual Agent, actually, because he creates a little chatbot with it. He asks it, what's your favorite movie? And he says that his favorite movie is Shawshank Redemption. Did I just gender the chatbot? I did. The chatbot says their favorite movie is Shawshank Redemption, which is actually my dad's favorite movie as well. Then Robin asks for a short synopsis of Shawshank, and he's able to give him back a whole paragraph about why Shawshank is awesome. And the last use case I wanted to share with you all is this sample data generator that Robin made also in a Power Apps. This one is really cool because there were 2 separate filtering capabilities that were added to this sample data generator. So initially, Robin asked for capitals of European cities, and he gets Paris, London, Rome, Madrid, and Berlin. Then he can go and further distill his sample data. He can go and ask for an image of this city. So from here, they get a bunch of images. You know, there's the Eiffel Tower for Paris, for example. And you can click through multiple image options. Then he can go and further say, I don't just want to know about it, I want to know also a description of the city. So he gets some information on population, for example, and now to recommend me some favorite sites within this city. And he calls back the original entry by using an asterisk. The app runs, and now he's recommended the Eiffel Tower, Notre Dame, Louvre. So I just wanted to share that with you all. Maybe go check out the OpenAI connector. It's really awesome. Let's go to the next slide. And the last thing I wanted to share with you all is that upcoming this month, in about, I believe, 2.5 weeks, is the Global Power Platform Bootcamp. It takes place from February 24th to February 25th, and you can find out more about it on powerplatformbootcamp.com. Why is this global? Well, as we were talking about before the call, one of the events are taking place in New York, actually in the Times Square Microsoft office. But there are, I believe, something like 60 other cities that this event is taking place in. So you can probably find an event to attend. This event is a live event, so you can actually go in, network, meet other people in the Power Platform community. It's being hosted by externals, predominantly MVPs and community members super involved with the Power Platform, and we'll have basically an entire day of speakers and sessions so that you can learn more about topics of your interest. And it's not officially official yet, but you may find somebody familiar, aka me, in the Times Square edition. So if any of you guys are near the tri-state area, I would love to meet you. And please visit this website if you're not to try and find a session near you. With that, I would love to hand it over to Chris to share some information for our educational session of the day about application lifecycle management.
Great, thanks, Jocelyn. I will share my screen.
Thank you.
I'm gonna have to look up those community sessions, see if there's one near Fargo, North Dakota, where I am.
There might be. Didn't we talk about how there is a large Microsoft? Oh no, I talked about this with Jared yesterday. There's a large Microsoft presence in Fargo, apparently.
There is, yeah. Yeah, so hi, I'm Chris Garty. I'm a senior product manager on the Power Automate team, specifically on the Cloud Flows team, and my team specifically deals with administration and lifecycle. So the lifecycle part of that mandate is application lifecycle management, or ALM. I'm going to give you a little bit of a Cloudflow's perspective on that today. Great. So let's talk about Power Platform ALM. So I'll run through ALM. I'll run through kind of Power Platform ALM, and then I'll talk about some ALM related improvements. And then I'll just open it up for questions afterwards. Jocelyn mentioned that you're a fairly chatty bunch, so yeah, let's have some Q&A at the end as well. So Power Platform ALM, what is ALM? So it's the lifecycle management of applications, includes governance, deployment, and maintenance. We aim to drive efficiency through predictable and repeatable software delivery. The tools facilitate collaboration between teams and departments. It can be as simple as a maker building an app or a flow and then just asking an administrator to deploy it to production. So within the Power Platform, ALM spans multiple teams. It's a very, you'll hear about ALM and about ALM things from multiple teams. So my Power Automate team is just one of the teams that's building maker experiences for Power Platform products and contributing to this ecosystem, but there's a number of other teams. There's a team within Power Apps that's dedicated to application lifecycle management. There's a team that creates the solutions UI within the Dataverse team. They manage the solutions model and kind of experience as well. Yeah, so there's multiple teams that deal with ALM within the Power Platform. So the basic view of ALM is moving a maker, creating something, making changes to something, and then moving it from a development environment through to testing it, moving it back to development as needed, and then eventually moving it through to production once the testing passes. So environments and environment strategy are a really important part of ALM. Within the Power Platform, environments are a space to kind of store and manage and share your organization's data, apps, and business processes. So they form containers within the Power Platform. So within each environment, you should also be aware that you only have one Dataverse database. So you need to kind of deal with refreshing the data, loading the data, managing the data as well. So solutions are another important part of ALM. Solutions are used to transport apps and components from one environment to the next. They can be used to apply customizations to existing apps. They include metadata and entities with configuration data, components as well, but they don't contain business data. Yeah, so they're used for moving things around between environments. We also talk about source control. So source control is an important topic, one that is facilitated today using Power Platform build tools. So with build tools and source control, you can automate ALM. Source control is where you're going to have your single source of truth, all of the resources that you're creating inside of your environments. You want to get those into source control and then be able to move those to the appropriate environment from source control. Yeah, a shared source control can support team development by facilitating code reviews of changes as they're going into different environments, allow you some form of governance as things are moving between environments as well. So there are some build tools that are available for the Power Platform. They can be used to automate common build and deployment tasks. They create a pipeline that allows you to generate build artifacts, move things to downstream environments, provision and deprovision environments, perform static analysis checks using the solution checker. And automation is a key goal of what you're trying to do with application lifecycle management to improve the productivity, the reliability, the quality, and the efficiency of what you're doing. Try and take the human element out of it somewhat. You can use the tools to validate, export, pack, and unpack, and get the solutions into the environments that you want for testing, and then get them into production. once they're ready to go. So there's a number of other considerations related to ALM, but I wanted to give you that kind of just general overview of the topic space. You can certainly go out and look at our documentation. We've got a whole Learn site dedicated to ALM with a ton of documentation, and that will in turn point you to specific documentation about Power Automate aspects and Power Apps aspects and things such as this. But the other things to be aware of related to kind of applications and application lifecycle management and moving solutions and your automations in terms of flows around between environments are licensing considerations. So you're going to need to be aware of which licenses things are running under. You're going to want to be aware of governance and administration of the things that you move in between environments. Security is an important concept, using permissions and security to make sure that the things that are in environments are only accessed by the people that you want. And then there's an emerging capability around analytics. So in the last year, we made available a tenant-wide analytics and reports for Power Platform resources. So those are certainly a useful tool to be aware of. So what are some ALM related improvements that we've been working on recently? So the first dimension is something that we're referring to as pipelines. So today, Maker and Pro developer deployments are kind of disjointed. So for makers, you have an experience inside of the Maker portal that's simple. It allows you to export solutions, import solutions. The maker can set up their connections. They can deal with putting values into environment variables, but you need to have to be able to move something into test and production environments. You need to have maker permissions in those environments, and that's not something that we recommend, and it's not something that administrators at large customers are willing to provide. There's also no backup versioning, audit history, or governance controls related to the kind of simple abilities to export and import solutions. So it's kind of an incomplete picture for makers. And then for pro developers, you can have frequent automated deployments with enterprise level governance, and it's really powerful, leveraging the Power Platform build tools to facilitate that. But dealing with connections and deployment settings is difficult. There is a deployment settings file that you can leverage to pass deployment settings across. Connections kind of need to be created in the environment before you do the deployment, and then you can use deployment settings to kind of point at those connections and make use of them. But it's not maker friendly. So what we've recently made available is pipelines, Power Platform pipelines. There was a blog post about this in December. There is documentation available at that ALM Learn site that I referenced previously, specifically for pipelines. And you can do a Bing search or a Google search for Power Platform pipelines to learn more. It's currently in public preview, and it's going to GA in June. It's largely so if I can summarize it, administrators will set up a pipeline. It's very easy to set up a pipeline. There's currently a modeled app that you'll use to set up the pipeline. That experience will change over time, and kind of come into the maker and admin portals. And then makers, citizen developers, they can initiate deployments. So inside of the solutions experience, inside of the solution explorer, when you click into a solution, on the left side, in addition to being able to see your objects and your history, you'll have a pipelines tab. And that pipelines tab will give you access to the pipelines that your administrators have defined. And then you'll be able to move that solution into along the stages in the pipeline. As you're moving it into the stages in the pipeline, that maker will then be able to set up connections as needed for the solutions to leverage. So it's a way for a maker to kind of self-deploy and kind of self-help themselves and cut down on the burden on administrators and center of excellence teams to move things between environments. And developers, pro devs can also run those pipelines via CLI. And in the near future, there'll be capabilities coming out that allow you to create extensions to those pipelines, such as running flows immediately before or after something is deployed to set things up or send notifications. It's really going to be a great advancement. Yeah. So some ALM improvements that I've had a fairly close hand in delivering in the Cloudflow space. So over the last year, we've been doing a lot of ALM improvements related to Cloudflows. I've listed off a number of them here and kind of listed off the months that those became available. A few key ones to mention. We made it so that solution flows now show up in the My Flows experience. So the My Flows experience previously would have only shown non-solution flows. Now solution flows where the definitions is stored in Dataverse, those will show up in the My Flows experience. And when you click into one of those flows, you'll get a solutions card that will show you any of the solutions that that flow is contained within. In the future, we'll improve that solutions card to make it so that you can move flows between solutions and kind of change which solutions the flows are in. But this is a great start. We've also started making available the ability to have service principal application users own and run flows. So that's the information that's kind of shown below the fold. This capability is available in preview right now. It was meant to go public in January. I noticed that I still have January in the right column on this. It's going to become public in February. We're still working on some license enforcement pieces related to this. Once those are complete, then we'll have a blog post and documentation and kind of more information about the service principal support. But I know a large number of customers have asked for the service principal support, so I wanted to at least mention it here, that this is something that's kind of coming out in the next few weeks. Something else that's coming out really soon is the concept of flows and Dataverse by default. So last year, kind of at the end of last year, the Power Apps team made available a switch which allows environments to be opted into creating new Canvas apps in Dataverse solutions by default. So this means that when the maker is in there in Power Apps and they're in that kind of default apps experience and they go to create an app, if Dataverse is available in that environment, then that app will be created in Dataverse in a Dataverse solution and just added into Dataverse by default. We have a preview of this available now, a private preview of this available now for Cloudflows. We are in the process of kind of finishing up that work. Yeah, and it'll be available shortly, and we'll have a blog post related to this. So this will allow the first kind of milestone for this will facilitate blank flows and flows created from template to be added into Dataverse by default when Dataverse is available. So this is something that should be a great advancement for ALM and kind of governance capabilities. Because flows need to be inside of solutions to be able to move between environments. So having those flows automatically created in Dataverse, defined in a Dataverse solution so that you can quickly just move that into the solution of your choice or reference that from the solution of your choice certainly speeds up the ALM process. And then in the near future, in kind of March and April, we'll be adding support for all of the integration entry points, such as Teams and SharePoint, so that if Dataverse is in those environments, it will also create those flows inside of Dataverse by default. Additionally, we are just starting work on something that has been asked about a lot. It was the second most requested idea on the Power Automate Ideas site last year, and that is support for two things. I'll talk about the first, and that's being able to have draft and draft flows, being able to create draft flows and publish them, and being able to change flows and have them in a draft mode, and be able to save changes to a flow even if there are errors. Yeah, so we're actively working on this support right now. The support is being added into Dataverse using the component state capability. So we're excited to be working on this with the Dataverse team. The draft version of a flow will just always be turned off, and the published version of the flow that will be the one that end users see. And when you're ready to publish the draft flow,
I shall mute.
okay, sounds good. Yeah, when you're ready to publish that draft flow, then you just you'll be able to hit the publish button, and then users will start seeing that flow. That flow will be the one that will start running on a schedule, however that flow runs. Related to this, we're also going to be adding flow versioning, so versioning for cloud flows. So makers will be able to change and publish. So maker, yeah, maker changes and publish operations will be visible in a version history pane. Makers will be able to look at those previous versions to see what changed, restore to a previous version, and see which versions were published along the way. We also in the it probably won't come out immediately, but shortly afterwards you'll be able to add version notes similar to what you see in Power Apps today. So all of this versioning capability is being implemented via solution components. So this will be available for solution cloud flows, and cloud flows is the first place that this versioning support, this Dataverse versioning support, is being added, and then you'll see other solution components moving to this versioning support over time. All of the version information will be stored in Dataverse, and then the Dataverse team is also planning to do source control integration with Dataverse in the future as well. So that'll be something fun to look forward to, and definitely a help in terms of ALM capabilities, where things would just show up in source control automatically. Something else that's just in the early stages, we've just started talking about it, and we have a private preview of the developer tools related to it, is the Power Platform catalog. So this is something that we're working on, an organization-wide catalog of Power Platform components. This will enable pro developers and makers to easily share Power Platform artifacts with their colleagues to help solve business problems. And then we'll provide capabilities for administrators to be able to configure approvals and kind of decide which things they allow into the Power Platform catalog. Yeah, as I mentioned, the private preview of the pro developer tools are underway now. We've got a limited set of folks that are taking advantage of that, having a look at that and giving us feedback about it. And we'll open that up publicly here in the next month or so. So that's something really exciting related to ALM, and really allows makers to, we talked about pipelines enabling makers to kind of self-service themselves in terms of pushing things to different environments. The Power Platform catalog will allow makers to kind of self-service, facilitate getting things into environments via a pull mechanism. So it should be really exciting to see that. And that is me. So now, as I mentioned, I can just open it up for questions. I'll have a look at the chat. I wasn't looking at the chat as we were going along.
There were two questions from Phil in the chat. The first one had to do with which solution did they get added to by default? I don't remember which slide that was referring to, but feel free to unmute and just ask directly if you'd like.
I think it was which when solutions are added, flows are added to a solution because they're now in Dataverse by default.
Yeah.
If Dataverse is available. Is it default
Yes.
environment or some other solution?
Right, so it's
Default
just
solution.
that default solution. Yes, yeah. So for those that don't know, there's a default solution that isn't really a solution. It's really just a view of all of the components, solution components that have been added into Dataverse in some solution. We're adding it into that solution, just the default solution. So you'll be able to find those solution components and then add them into your solution of choice. If there's a caveat there. If you can always go into a solution and define it directly in that solution. And then the other thing is, if you have a solution context and then you go and start creating just in the MyFlows experience, start creating some flows and apps, those will drop into that solution context. So we will leverage the solution context when it is available.
That sounds cool.
Yeah.
Also to add, I think there's two default solutions, isn't there? There's the default solution that's everything, and then there's the common data services default solution, which has nothing in it from what I can see. I believe it's that second solution, isn't it? The common data services default
That's
solution.
what we were originally planning to do that. I must say I need to double check on that detail. I haven't seen that behavior happening recently. So yeah, I think we might have changed our minds on that. So
Yeah.
the common data services default solution is one that's heavily leveraged with the Teams integration. So yeah, I need to double check on that. Sorry.
Yeah, I read it somewhere, but I haven't tested it. So
yeah, it's good to see people looking forward to draft flows.
Yeah. Phil also had a question about, are different versions of the flows still stored in the workflow table?
Yes, so the Dataverse team is still working out exactly how the version information will be stored, but yes, likely it'll just be in the workflow table. Yeah. I don't have specifics on that. Like, it's literally in development right now. But yes, the version information will be available in Dataverse. If it's not directly in that workflow table, it'd be in a linked table. So you'd be able to
Yes.
grab that information.
Chandra asked a question about, are any updates on supporting service principal for more connectors? It is a conversation we are having. It is definitely somewhere in our roadmap and something I've actually spoken about just this week. With regards to distinct timeline or date, I'm not sure, but yes.
Yeah, so service principal support, right? Yeah, on Jocelyn's team, they are looking at adding service principal support for more connectors. It's a one at a time thing. It's not something that we can add all connectors, add service principal support for all connectors
That is
at
actually
once.
a common conversation for a lot of things that have to do with connector enhancement. For certain things where, it's enabled for a few connectors, it may have originally been coded so that it was individually enabled for each of those very few connectors. So for us to go back and then fix them on a 940 connector basis is a lift. So we're trying to figure out how.
Right.
I just want to make sure we leave time for Sean as well. But who has their hand raised? And then, yeah, let's go with Michael.
Hi, thanks very much. My question's similar to the one that's just posted in the chat. Appreciate the overview, Chris. It looked really exciting for the new ALM pipelines. Will that be replacing the ALM Accelerator app? And specifically, some of our teams that are using the GitHub Actions and the Azure Pipeline Actions, are they being retired in favor of this, or will they still be maintained?
So the build tools that you mentioned at the end there, those will still stick around. You can still create pipelines as needed. You'll be able to extend the solution pipelines that get created with build tools. There's some interplay there, some extensibility that the team is still working on. Will pipelines replace the ALM Accelerator app? Not in the near term. I don't have a super clear answer for this. So the ALM Accelerator app is something that's available, for those that don't know, is something that's available via the COE starter kit, and it can facilitate deployments, and makers can run it to request deployments. So in much the same way that you can with pipelines. They're very similar capabilities. There's still some capabilities that are available via the ALM accelerator that aren't in the pipelines, in the solution pipeline space. I guess the question would be, if you were starting today, would you be able to use the Power Platform pipelines, solution pipelines, instead of the ALM accelerator app? I think you could today. Yeah, so we'll see how that develops.
Awesome. And I think we will take 2 more questions and then leave the last 15-ish minutes for Sean. So the last 2 questions is the one from Jason, Chris, in the chat about since we are allowed to move flows, and then after that, Phil's last question about docs.
Yeah, this is so the question is, since we're allowed to move flows between environments easily, when will SharePoint catch up and be able to run flows from outside the default environment from a button on a list? There's talk about there's active discussions going on related to this. So there's discussions about SharePoint being able to kind of point at different environments. Yes, being able to point at a different environment. There's a kind of a sub question there of like, well, what about multiple environments? There have been discussions about that as well, being able to see flows in multiple environments and be able to run those in the context of a SharePoint site. There aren't any firm decisions on this right now. Yeah, it's a topic that I catch up on like once every couple of months, and it seems like it's been progressing slowly over the last year or so.
And then the last question was about, are there any docs on the preview feature of using SP to own flows?
Yeah, no, there isn't right now. Yeah, we're still waiting on that governance support before doing the blog posts and publishing the documentation related to the service principal ownership of flows. So you heard it here first.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chris, for all of these updates and explanations. I actually put a question in the chat that was like, use me as a like button if we want Chris to come back and talk about admin stuff, because you and I were discussing that yesterday.
Yeah.
And you got some likes, so maybe we shall bring you back, because I know there are a good quantity of makers here, but apparently there are also some admin personas as well in this audience. So perhaps we shall see Chris again.
Nice, that'd be great.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'll watch the chat. If anyone has other questions, feel free to ask in the chat.
Great. With that, I shall transition back over and introduce our independent publisher today. Sean Kelly is here to share his Microsoft Learn connector that he has made. So Sean, feel free to take over. Use as much of the remainder of the time as you would like. It is completely yours.
I obviously haven't shaved in a while, based on that image. Hi everyone, I'm Sean Kelly. I don't have any presentation prepared. I'm just going to go straight into demo mode for this, but I've been working with the platform for over a decade now, most recently with HCL Tech as an educator. So I've been using the Microsoft Learn catalog internally in my role, and I had a custom connector built internally to access some of the content there. And I figured that it might be a good idea to publish it, both to learn about how the certification process works, because I train people on custom connectors as well internally, and also, it might be useful for some people, So that's what I did, and that's why I'm here to show you it today. So what is it? Well, basically, the Microsoft Learn Catalog API is a way to access the Microsoft Learn Catalog, self-evident, and you can access all of this type of information. Now, I'll just plug some of these. I'm not going to go through all the docs or anything, but I'll plug them into the chat if people want to read afterwards. But basically, you've got this API endpoint, which is going to access all of that content. It's a huge JSON object. It's just that single endpoint. So if you want to access certifications or learning paths or modules or whatever it is from that catalog, you hit that endpoint and you provide a type if you want to filter it down, right? So that's basically what the custom connector wrapped around. So coming into the custom connector definition, basically here we have this independent publisher one. This is a Microsoft API, but I published a connector, therefore independent publisher. So within this, we've got a single action because we've got that single endpoint to hit. And then we pass in parameters. The critical one really is the type. If you don't want to return everything from that catalog, you need to provide a type. I've tried to kind of give detailed description so that if you're in Power Automate or in Power Apps using this, that you'll get those prompts, including examples. So you can say, okay, well, the example here, it's a comma separated string. This would return modules and learning paths. So you're not restricted to returning a single type, for example. And it's the same for basically all of these. And you've got levels, roles, products. If you're familiar with going into Microsoft Learn, I hope most of you are, and you can filter down for different products, beginner, advanced, intermediate. All of those are basically represented here as parameters. So that's basically what the connector does. So what I'm going to do is show you how to access it both from a flow in Power Automate, quite a simple one, just to show the endpoint. And then I'll show how I've used it in a Canvas app as well. So I've got a flow here that I just created earlier. I always wanted to say, here's one I made earlier. So there we go. And we've got this is just an instant flow. And I've got a trigger here, and I'm basically want to capture the type from the user because I don't want to return everything from that API. So basically, I've provided a text drop-down list that would be kind of captured from the user. I'll probably just delete this and just add it again, just to show it's not that difficult. But adding a new step, we're going to look for the Microsoft Learn connector, and then we've got all of the kind of documentation gets returned there. If I select this, you can see it's just that single action that's there. But then we've got all of this, and this is just the exact same text that we saw from the documentation, right? So that's just coming through. So if you hover over any of these, you'll get a kind of description about what it's expecting with an example of what would be acceptable at the end. So in this case, I've got a parameter here called content type. So that's for my type property. So I'm going to come in here and just dynamically grab the content type from the input. And that's fine. I won't do any further filtering here. I'll show you further filtering in the Canvas app. So if I save this, okay, and then we'll just test it out. And then we've got the various different options. So I'm going to say courses, run. So let's just hit that endpoint. And if we look at the output, we should just see courses. Okay, so we've just returned courses from that API. And we've got the various different courses there. And you'll see it returns a lot of metadata there as well. So it's quite useful if you want to build your own LMS, for example. And then let's try another one. So I'll just test it one more time and grab some learning paths, or all learning paths in this case. And again, that's run. If we check the output, we can see now that we've hit the same endpoint, but now we're returning learning paths. Okay. Okay, there we go. So very simple. And then in the learning paths, we've got, the metadata there, like the summary, what roles it's for, what products it's applicable for, the subjects, the unique identifier, and other things like the modules. So we've for this particular one, which is related to Azure, we've got these 6 modules, and that's the unique identifier of the modules. So I'm using that in the Canvas app. So that's kind of why I'm pointing that out right now. So that's it, very simple, how you use it. Hopefully if you are using it, and the tooltips and the description should kind of clarify how to use it. My details have been shared, so if anybody gets stuck, I reluctantly agree for you to contact me for support. So let's see. So next up, we've got, I want to show a Canvas app. So I've built a Canvas app that basically accesses the content and displays it. Really, it's just a single page Canvas app or a single screen with a few galleries in place. So we've got a couple of galleries here for learning paths, modules. I'll get into how I connected to the connector to kind of populate these in a second. But if I jump over into play mode, basically we've got it's loading all learning paths by default, and then it's applying these 2 filters. So I've got a couple of combo boxes here, one for levels, one for roles. As we saw in the connector, in the parameters, there's probably 8 or 9 of them. So I could have added a lot more. I'm just a bit lazy, so I just picked these as a start point. So you can filter, change, change to say intermediate developer, and you've got integrate with Power Automate and flows. You can see it's making a call there to retrieve the actual module information, because one thing we don't get in the learning path response is the details of the module. We only get the unique identifier of the module, as we saw in the previous step. But here I can open in Microsoft Learn. So from there I can launch the learning path, or if I want to launch an individual module, I can go there and launch the module. So it's as simple as that. You can change. It's now making another call. I could make this it's kind of staggered a bit, so I haven't put a huge amount of effort into this app. It's not a production app, but you get the idea. So how do we leverage that connector that's been published to access this content? Well, if we jump back into edit mode, again, there's the 2 main galleries. There's the gallery for the learning path here on the left, and there's a gallery on the right, lower right there, for modules. So if I go into learning paths, the first thing to look at is the items property. So this is that single endpoint on the connector, get learning content, the exact same endpoint that we just saw in Power Automate. And then we can optionally pass as many parameters as we want from what was the original docs. So we've got all of these different parameters. So we can say, only give me learning paths modified in the last X days or since the last date, or give me them with this role or this level, etc. So in this case, I've passed in the locale, the type, the level, the role, the product. And you can see the level and the role are just coming from that combo box, the level combo box and the role combo box. So whatever's selected on the screen there. You'll also see there's a variable for product. If we get time, I'll show you how that works. But we're basically saying from that we want to retrieve learning paths. Okay, so that's what we're presenting. So that's that first call. So when the app runs, it's making a call to populate the learning paths from that connector. Now, in the if we remember the response that we get, we have this array of modules. So I'm just using that to then go off and get the details for the modules because I want more information other than the unique identifier. So that's what I'm doing in the on select for the gallery. So in the on select, I'm basically I've got this learning path modules variable, and I'm or collection, sorry, and then I'm saying for each module that was in the response from the learning path call. So remember, in this one, it's what, 5 or 6 objects in that array. So for each of those modules, I want to loop through with the unique identifier and populate this collection from that same endpoint, the get learning content. But I want to use that unique identifier that we got previously from the learning path call and then return the modules. And that's going into the collection. And then if we go over here, we see the collection items property is just set as that, or the items property for this gallery is set as that collection. So that's kind of how it works. What else am I doing? Let's see, is there anything else interesting on select? Okay, yeah, so I've got like a levels, roles, products collection as well. And I'm basically getting the levels, you can probably guess from the name, I'm getting the levels, the roles, and the products from that learning path. And again, let's just kind of switch back here for a second. I'm getting the levels, the roles, and the products from that learning path, and I'm adding them to a collection so that I can display it on the screen, right? So when I come here, it's these kind of buttons here, these things here. So that's a gallery just with the appended levels, roles, and products, just to kind of recreate what you see in Microsoft Learn, because they do the same thing. Yeah, and then the final thing I wanted to talk about in this app in the 3 minutes that I've got is the products. So in the items property, I'm using a variable called product. And why am I doing that? Well, I'm doing that for Teams integration. So if I come to the app on start property, you'll see that I'm doing some things, but in particular, I want to kind of look at the product. So I'm setting a default product of Power Platform. That's why the app returns the Power Platform learning paths by default. But then I'm saying, if you are passing a channel ID, if this app receives a channel ID, then change that product depending on the channel. And that's a channel in Teams. So if I've got the Dataverse or Common Data Service channel in Teams, I only want to return the Common Data Service or Dataverse products. Same for AI Builder or Power Apps, etc. So then we can come over, and then this ID here, this is the unique identifier of the channel in Teams. So I've hard-coded these channels from my particular Teams instance. So if I jump over to Teams, I've got a Power Platform Learning team with all of these channels. So if I go to, say, the AI Builder channel and go to the catalog, now because the channel ID is being passed in from Teams, it's only going to filter for the AI Builder learning paths. Or if I go to Power Apps and go to the Learn catalog, this should be passing in Power Apps as the product in that variable based on the Teams channel. So I'm only getting that. And then if I go to Power Automate, I don't have it. It's quite easy to add though. I can say add a Power App. And then I've got my Learn catalog, save. And now this should be passing in Power Automate. I had to do that because Power Automate was the subject earlier. Didn't want them to feel left out, the Power Automate product team. And now we've got our product being set there, right? So it's showing a few different things, but it's all leveraging the that custom connector, which became a published independent publisher connector. So that's it. We've got 1 or 2 minutes left. So any questions or anything like that, I'd be happy to answer if I can. Call to action. Try it out. Let me know if you get stuck anywhere.
Yeah, Sean, it's very cool to see. Yeah, it's very cool to see how like it starts as just one action and then you're able to leverage that to do a lot more. That was a really cool scenario. Can you filter documentation by path? I put a scenario in the chat that was like I was imagining using this, you could probably create an app to show you the most recently updated docs under some path, like the Power Platform / ALM path.
So it doesn't return the full documentation set. It's all learning content based. So it's learning paths, and underneath that modules, and underneath that units. So they're the kind of granularity for learning paths. And then you've got certifications and things like that, but you don't actually have access to the wider documentation base, what was formerly docs.microsoft.com. So you wouldn't return all of the ALM pages, for example, but you could do that scenario for the content that is stored there, like learning paths and stuff.
Nice.
Daniel asked, is it only module/training?
Well, it's not just that, but it's let's go back to the original docs for a second, which is here. So the well, actually, I'll go to my documentation. So the I've got it here. So supported values are this. So that's what you can return from the API. So when we're thinking about Microsoft learning paths, so you've got learning paths at the top can contain many modules, and each module can contain one or more units. So you've got learning paths, modules, and units. You can also return certifications and exams. So if you visualize the certifications page or the exams page, it gives you metadata back there with the related products and stuff like that. Everything else is kind of like metadata, like the levels, the roles, the products, the subjects. They're those kind of filtering attributes. So they're smaller.
Well, then I think that answered a different question about, is it possible to filter through PL 400, etc.?
Yeah, you could go in and just change the type to exams, and then it would return all exams. Or if you know the UID, the unique identifier for PL 400, you can pass in the UID parameter with that PL 400 UID, and it will just return that single exam with all of the details of that exam. Not the questions and answers, though.
Awesome. Are there any more questions? If not, that about concludes our session for today. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. I hope you all enjoyed this. I hope you enjoyed the content, the educational section, being able to see this demo. Rebecca, were you going to say something? Just hearts. Just hearts.
Sorry, it's the raise hand next to React. I always click the wrong one.
Very relatable. I hope you all enjoyed this. Stay tuned for the next session. We run, I believe, the second Wednesday of every month. So next time shall be March 8th. As always, this will be posted on LinkedIn. And I finally found a way to send this to you guys all as a calendar invite. So you should be able to actually go and save that locally as well. So you don't have to do the silly click this link to join anymore. So I hope you guys are able to keep this on your calendar. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thanks.